So government is under pressure to urgently act to avoid further damage to the South African economy. The latest GDP figures just yesterday showed another angle to the extent of ruin caused by the COVID-19 pandemic and subsequent lockdown. Gross domestic product shriveled by a worrying 16.4% in the second quarter of this year. And there are predictions that the situation is likely going to get much worse before we begin to see signs of improvement. President Cyril Ramaphosa, in his response to those figures, says that now is the time to act quickly and boldly to place South Africa on a rapid growth trajectory. Let's discuss then the government response to the grim economic picture and bring in economist and commissioner at the National Planning Commission, Miriam Altman. We're also going to be joined in a moment by COSATU General Secretary Peggy Njali. Also joining us is Duma Kobule, founding director at the Center for Economic Development and Transformation. Miriam, Duma, we see you guys. So Duma, let me start with you. Firstly, thank you to you both for being on the program. So does government, Duma, even know what to do with this economy at this stage?
You know, Thembekile, what these figures show is that there was a decline in the government's contribution to the economy during the second quarter. And this shows many South Africans are horrified that they don't know what has happened to the 500 billion stimulus. And that just shows what we are saying, that there was no 500 billion rand stimulus and the government's contribution was minimal towards the stimulus. Let me just show you something. In Parliament last Tuesday, they had a presentation where they said they'd allocated 122.4 billion rands towards the COVID relief. And then they also said that 109 billion rand would be taken away from other spending. So that is a net contribution from the government of 13.4 billion rands. The government also said in that presentation that they'd only spent between April and August 18 billion rands. So what we are seeing now is we are on track towards experiencing a decline in government spending during the worst depression in a century. So the government is gaslighting South Africans because South Africans know that there is no stimulus, and they are telling us that there's something wrong, that there is a stimulus. We are providing all the evidence in numerous interviews, in numerous articles, that there is no stimulus. By the end of 2021, I can guarantee you, Thembekile, that the only part of the stimulus that will be real is the 40 billion rands from the UIF.
Miriam, you are involved, of course, with the National Planning Commission. Duma says government is gaslighting South Africans. There is no stimulus. Do you agree?
Look, there are definitely programs in place, and the programs have been a little slow to get off the ground. There's no doubt about that. You know, there's just been the Auditor General weighing in on IF. Whether they've overreached or not is a question, but we know that there have been problems there. The loan bridging finance has also gone slowly. And the challenge now is that many firms can't take more debt on. A lot of firms are, at a point where, they're just taking on too much debt. So even if you give cheap loans, a lot of people at this moment by now can't take it. The critical thing, though, is I got to say, all of this is new. It's new for everyone. So, start thinking about, how we move forward. The bridging support, we're kind of running out of road and time for that. Now we've got to start stimulating the economy. But to be honest, and coming back to Duma's point, in my view, the most important thing we can do for jobs right now is just secure workplaces that are labor intensive, services, retail, hotels, restaurants, all the places, particularly where young people work. So the faster we get moving with securing those places, getting consumers to feel confident, securing even the public sector needs to strengthen the extent to which it's protecting environments. And we've got to give confidence to people and companies that they can reopen and we can get activity moving. I mean, that's going to be the biggest immediate stimulus.
You spoke
My
apologies. You spoke about a delay in the implementation of some of the relief that has been necessary from mid-March when the lockdown began. Why has there been such a delay? Because government in the initial presentation had made it seem as though it had its ducks in a row, even though a pandemic was not what had been anticipated, say, 6 months before March.
Look, the issue is that the machinery of government, we know that the system of government has weakened over the past decade. That was a feature of state capture, was the undermining of the capacity of the state. So when you say we're going to introduce something new, I mean, what UIF was trying to do was something so dramatically greater than what it was doing before in a system that was already struggling. And they introduced a new electronic system and so on. So it's not surprising at all that it didn't go the way that one would have thought. You know, I convene a group of economists that's working on solutions, and we had said, rather put it through revenue services that has the relationships with companies and claw it back in the tax system if you have firms that are profitable. There's still that opportunity to do that. Treasury had regulated for a few months the expansion of the youth wage subsidy to a broader cross-section of firms. We could be doing that, and then you're not introducing new systems. Now, if you have a weakened institution of government, and then you think that you're going to introduce rapidly major programs of spending that are new, I think you're dreaming. I just don't think it's physically possible. And so I think that there was goodwill in wanting to do this, but it's very difficult to do. So the best thing we can do, certainly to strengthen the programs that are there, but the best immediate thing we can do to save jobs and get the economy going is to get people back to work, frankly. And the problem that's arising, it's not just that people have to go back to work. Customers have to go back. Even the doctors are struggling. Many doctors are going to go under because people aren't coming for checkups, things like that. That's going to create health problems. So the more that we can do, what I've been trying to advocate also is that, industries, the public sector, that we do much, much more to secure COVID compliant workplaces in the public sector, in the private sector, in the transport systems, in communities, that we get much more participative approaches, that we get much better at the contact tracing, providing information, pushing up information. We're just not making the progress. And we're not alone on that globally, by the way. But the reality is we do have the technology. We could be better at it. And post-COVID, we'll always be able to use those systems. But the problem is that even though the numbers are coming down, we see in Italy and other countries that they can go up again. So we won't survive that. So the most urgent thing we need to do is to follow the kinds of things that actually Professor Shabir Muddy and others on the MAC are driving, are pushing, which is let's get those preventative measures strengthened so people can get back to work.
All right. Duma, I want to take a point that Miriam was making about how globally we've seen countries battle with their response, economic and at other levels, to the impact and effects of COVID-19. It makes you wonder then if we as South Africa are perhaps not being too hard on ourselves.
Thembekile, let's talk about the crisis before the crisis. Since President Ramaphosa became president, we've had 7 out of 10 quarters of declining GDP. We've had 8 out of 10 quarters of declining gross fixed capital investment, which is a measure of investment in the economy. And we've had 5 consecutive years of declining GDP capita. We had 2 consecutive years of declining GDP in 2018, 2019. And in March 2020, we had already had 3 consecutive quarters. Now it's 4 consecutive quarters. Now, if you want to compare with other countries, it becomes clear that we have not saved lives and we have not saved livelihoods. If you compare our response, for example, on the graphs with Brazil, which came up with a massive package, which is 50% of the stimulus that went to households, or if you compare with South Korea, where they've got much less deaths than we, they've got a similar population than us, and the deaths, the last time I looked, was about 400 or 500 people, and they had far less cases than we have. So we've got 14,000 deaths. We're number 5 in the world, the last time I looked, and we are failing on the economic side. South Korea has had 3 stimulus packages worth 15% of GDP. They sent out a voucher for 97% of households that was paid out it expires at the end of August, 3 months, and you have to spend the money within 3 months. So there's so much innovation that is happening in countries throughout the world, and I don't think we are anywhere near the top of the countries of the world in terms of the COVID response. The last thing I want to say is that the UK announced its stimulus package 3 days before the lockdown. And then we were so slow in announcing our so-called stimulus package, and there wasn't frankly, any thinking as to what to do to the economy. And the last thing I want to say, I was talking to someone with a restaurant recently, and the problem with restaurants for them to open is that I owe about so much, I think it was like almost R1 million that he owes. So for him to pay the landlord, he has to, it's like he's starting a business again from scratch, and he must get financing for this. So it's many. So what we're going to see in South Africa currently is that we're going to see the permanent scarring of our society. Many businesses will not open again, and we will not. We've lost many of these jobs permanently. And what I find really bizarre is that I've looked at all the economic recovery plans by all the social partners at NEDLAC. Government has got two, one from the ANC, one from the government. None of the government ones, or the ANC ones, or the Presidential Economic Advisory Council has got a single new idea to tackle this once-in-a-century crisis. And everything hinges on a change in the Regulation 28 that now enables, supposedly, some of the pension and retirement funds to invest in infrastructure. But there is no contribution from the government towards this recovery package.
And I want to come back after the break. Perhaps you can talk about the processes at NEDLAC, because there was supposed to be a team set up that's supposed to present some sort of plan to the president. But Duma, you touched on this at the beginning of your response to that previous question. These are the problems that predated the COVID-19 lockdown. And I wonder if in our reading of the situation as we sit here in September of 2020, we're even able to separate the problems.
No, we can't separate the problems. Yeah. And the electricity problem is preventing a recovery in our economy. And for 3 years, the government hasn't found a solution to the balance sheet of Eskom. It is just absurd. I don't understand it yet. There's so many proposals, Thembekile, in terms of sorting out the Eskom balance sheet. There's proposals flying around everywhere. There's Kosatu back in Chali will tell you about his when he comes on. There's ones from the PIC itself. There's ones from the Sustainability Task Team of the President. And there's no shortage of proposals on the President's desk, but there is no decision.
Duma Kubule, Miriam Altman, stand by for us. We continue with our conversation about the latest GDP figures, and the President now saying now is in fact the time to act urgently, in fact, to save the South African economy. We'll speak about work that's being done at NEDLAC, where government, labour and business have been discussing the plans, but there's still no real material plan as things stand. This is Newsgrid. Don't go away.